Hello, everybody, and welcome to Canada's Real Deal. I'm your host, Anuj.
And I'm Anika.
And I'm going to call us the Realist Sisters, like real estate.
Oh my God, Anuj, we're 10 seconds in and you're already starting with the puns.
I can't help myself.
So just so the audience know, you guys are probably going to see a lot more of that because she loves puns.
But let's talk about something I love more than puns, real estate.
Okay.
So I think the topic we're going to discuss is probably the highest on every Canadian's list of issues with Canada. We're going to take a look at how we can tackle the Canada's housing shortage.
And I think when we talk about the problem, I think we should actually elaborate on what the actual problem is, because I don't think people are very clear on what Canadians are actually facing or the root of the problem yet.
Yeah. And they think it's just supply and demand.
Yeah. And they just think like, house prices are going up and, it's real estate agents. They're driving up prices because they're putting up ridiculous listing prices or something. But it's more than that. It's actually like there's a lot of economic reasons for why this is happening. So why don't we start off by explaining how immigration and real estate are kind of driving all of these issues, right? So first of all, Canada has about 2.5 million non-permanent residents in the country who need to rent or who need a place to live. And that's driving up rental prices.
Yep.
Okay. Then on top of that, we have about 500,000 permanent residents coming in 2025.
Yep.
And we're planning to bring in 1.5 million over the next 3 years.
Yep. And I think these are very conservative numbers. It's probably going to be much higher than this.
Yeah. And all of these people are going to need places to live. And right now, there's definitely a shortage. We don't have enough houses to home these people. So the only thing to do is to build more units.
Yes. And why are we not building these units?
Well, let's first break down the numbers. If we're going to house 1.5 million more people, but by 2030, we need about 686,000 units made per year.
Yes, 636,000. That's crazy.
Yeah. And how much are we making right now?
I think we are only at 286.
Yes. I think this year we only started building 240,000 units.
Yes. And some might say this is because of the market. And, I agree with that. It was very expensive to build. The cost of borrowing money is super high. The cost of materials is super high. And the other thing is we have a huge labor shortage. We don't have skilled workers who are coming to Canada and can help build all these homes that we need.
Yeah. So you'll notice that every time we talk about issues in real estate or issues with housing affordability, it always kind of goes back to immigration, right? Immigration is the solution, but it's also part of the problem.
Yeah.
Right? We're bringing in a lot of talented professionals, but right now, I think what Canada really needs is skilled trade workers.
Yes, I was actually looking at a stat. 2022, it said that there was 82,000 unfulfilled positions in the construction industry. 82,000. And this is from Stats Canada.
Wow.
So that just goes to show you there's jobs, but there's nobody here to fulfill them.
Right.
If there's nobody here to build these homes, how can you house all these people that we expect to bring in over the next decade?
So we need to bring in more trade we need to bring in more trade people, but where will we house them?
Where are we going to put them?
Right? All of this was just planned really, really poorly.
Yeah. And I think that's probably my biggest criticism to most of Toronto design, building their solutions to everything. It's very poorly thought out. And I don't think it helps the average person.
Right. But I think, okay, so that's the immigration aspect of it. But let's say we took matters into our own hand and we started building houses ourselves instead of waiting for developers to do it or for Canada to figure it out. We just got investors to start building properties. They face a lot of problems as well, just because there's so many issues at the municipal level of actually getting these houses built.
Yeah, this is what we call the red tape.
Right. Why don't we explain what the red tape is? Because I don't think people actually understand what red tape means. I think they just think it's just like, oh, there's rules for how you can build this and stuff, but it's a little bit more deep than that. Yeah.
Like if you take the literal image of red tape, you can't go past it to start doing whatever you need to do in construction, right? So there's a lot of municipal rules, like bylaws, zoning rules. And then there's all these other factors the cost of construction, permits, the process, the time it takes that really turn people off from building.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so let's talk about the zoning bylaws, right? Toronto has something called the yellow belt, right?
Yep.
And I think that takes up, you can correct me if I'm wrong, 75% of the greater Toronto area?
Yeah, no, you're right.
Okay, so, and in this region, we're not allowed, or in these areas, we're not allowed to build multiplexes.
Yep.
So we can only build single family homes.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
And with a higher population, especially for having more immigrants coming in, we need more density in these areas.
Yeah. And the thing is, so these yellow areas are neighborhoods. So I don't know. It could be because the neighbors don't want you building and they don't want multiplexes and, you know, people coming into their neighborhood. So I kind of understand where the city is coming from. But if you have these barriers in, nobody's going to have a place to go and nobody's going to want to build. Because for me, if I had a bungalow and you're telling me that I can only build a single family home, I'm going to build the most expensive home then. Because if I'm going to get some money back on my investment, I'm going to build a multi-million-dollar home. And so now this again is driving the prices up again in this neighborhood and contributing again to the housing crisis and unaffordability.
Yeah, I think there's a thing, there's also a psychology aspect of it, right? I think Torontonians are also pretty opposed to having a changing landscape in their neighborhoods, right? They like the neighborhood that they're in. They like the culture that might have attracted them to actually be living in that neighborhood. And then so when you're trying to increase the density in that neighborhood and maybe start building multiplexes, or you're starting to build mid-rise buildings or high-rise buildings, right? There's going to be opposition to that. Right. 100%. And another thing in Toronto is we do public consultations, right? We need to make sure that the locals are happy or are going to accept this proposed plan or this proposed development. Yeah.
So anybody who's going against the current zoning will for sure have to go through that process to get approved.
Right. And that's going to add time into actually getting these things built. Time we don't have.
Because there's rules for how much notice you have to give, how public these notices are. And the thing is, I think it's very like closed off kind of thinking, because it works for now. For now, somebody wants to be in that 2-story house in whatever neighborhood. But when they get older, I don't think they're going to be wanting to go up those stairs, right? They want a condo in the same neighborhood that they're used to. But if you can't build multiplexes or condos there, then what are they going to do? They have to move out and they don't want to do that. And then there's all these other issues that come up with that, right? But they just don't have the foresight to think about this aging population.
That is such a good point, actually. I never thought about that. That you would want to stay in that same neighborhood that you've like settled in and you created a whole life in.
Yeah.
But you probably at some point want to downsize.
You have to.
Right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of these boomers who are in their homes right now, they do want to downsize, but it's just, it would be such an upheaval in their life.
Yeah. So what I would say is that if there's no homes that like mixed use, right? There's no condos here. There's just those single family homes just spread out in the entire neighborhood. That is going to force a lot of people to move, right? And as the population gets older, I think 1/5 of the population is going to be a senior in 10 years, right? You're going to have a huge migration now. And if our generation is not having kids, right, they're also going to be wanting the same kinds of homes that the boomers are, right? So I kind of see these single family homes kind of being obsolete in the future.
Right.
I don't know. That's what I think.
I mean, and then on top of that, though, there's also issues about getting these things built in terms of like, you know, there's shade requirements, or maybe you can speak more on that, or like there's a lot of studies that need to be done in order to get these things approved, right? There's a lot of things. To be honest, Toronto does a pretty good job, or they're pretty thorough about making sure that they've put a lot of thought into what they're developing, right? They do have strict rules, which is for our benefit. Yeah. Even if they do add time into getting things built, but they are kind of a necessary evil. It's not really an evil. It's for our benefit. Yeah. But I mean, right now, obviously we're thinking like the number one priority is to get as many units built as possible. But do we want to have a neighborhoods that are not well thought out? Right. That
is true. Well, I've been on both sides of the coin, right? I've been with that buyer who says, is there going to be a building popping up in my view and obstructing it? And then, we got to go look through the permit process and see if anybody's put an application in. Right. But I've also been with the investor who said, what's the best use for this land, which of course is going to be a condo. And then we go through the process and we get a quote that's going to take 5 to 10 years. Right. And who knows how much that's going to cost. So I understand. And then especially in downtown Toronto, urban heat island effect, right? These skyscrapers are trapping all the heat in. So we do need to think about canopy and the green development standards and how we can incorporate that, because it does help people and it does make their quality of life much better when you're downtown Toronto. So I get it, but I just wish there was some way to speed through maybe just the revision and the reviewing process.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, with how I said it earlier, that immigration and real estate go hand in hand, but everything is integrated, right? Our public health is integrated with how we plan and design our cities, right? How we plan and design our homes, our overall well-being, right? How we interact with society. All of this depends on how we design our cities. Yeah. Even our environment, right? The environmental concerns, all of that stuff to make our having nice parks. Yeah. Right? Having enough green space for people, for them to have better mental health. Yeah. These things seem like fluff, right? When people are thinking about the numbers and they're thinking about like, we need these units, we need a certain output or something, right? If we get caught up in that, we end up compromising on all that other stuff that's also equally important.
100%. I agree.
Right? Yeah. So it's a pretty complicated issue. But you were speaking about investors, and the other thing that really slows down developing these homes or getting enough homes built is building permits. Yeah. And it's how long it takes to actually get a shovel into the ground to actually start construction, and how much it costs. It's like tens of thousands of dollars that you've spent before you've even started constructing or even started breaking ground. Yeah. And you'll see a lot of projects in the news are defaulting or they're going bankrupt, right? And it's because of all these costs for permits and the drawings. Each time that there's something wrong, there's a revision, there's an inspection, whatever it is. And that's more time. That's more months going on where they're carrying the load. And we know the interest rate's really high right now. Yeah. So who can afford all of this? And how does this incentivize anyone to build? It definitely doesn't. If the carrying costs are like ridiculous, people typically don't have that, right? And you need to have like 30% of a construction project's costs in your pocket before you even start, right? Because that's just how financing for these things work. I saw a stat where they were saying like, so this is a Canada-wide issue, right? This happens across the country where investors face these types of problems. Yeah. But I saw a stat where I think the average time that it takes to get a building permit approved is like 1.5 years almost for a lot of places. Well, but in Toronto, not surprised. Yeah. And in Toronto, it can go up to like 36 months. That's, you know what? It's actually true. Because I had a client and we're just getting a legal unit in the basement. And this basement's already finished. We were quoted 3 months. That's for the permits and finishing the entire basement. And then now they just finished. So it's been 7 months. And each time the inspector would come and pick out one thing, then they would have to finish that or fix it before they could move on to the next step. And then after that, then again, another inspection and all of this, right? So 3 months turns into 7 months, which means 7 months that they've carried the entire mortgage themselves. They didn't have that extra funding from coming in from the basement. And then at the end of the day, they told me, probably not going to do this again. Wow. Yeah. See, like it just puts a bad taste in people's mouths. And then they're just like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to put myself through this. And 7 months, that's double the time that they probably prepared for. 100%. And that's why people go the illegal route, right? Yes. Like why go through why go through the city, right? If they could build everything according to the standard and give a good quality of a basement or whatever secondary unit and they would have started probably 1.5 months in after purchasing if they didn't go and get a permit. Yeah. I have a sneaky suspicion that the city of Toronto is probably relying on people to go the illegal route to actually get these houses these units available for people who are coming in. Actually, I don't want to say that, but I think that they know that this is what people will do if they have that investor mindset.
Yeah, it's turning into that.
It's definitely turning into that. And they know that it's a problem. This is putting people's lives at risk, right? If you don't have the right safety precautions in place and people aren't following the rules, people's lives are actually in danger, because these are rules that make sure that people have fire safety, that they have a certain quality of life in those basements.
Sunlight, exits, convenience, just like parallel parking. Very, very basic things that they think about, right? When you're making a legal unit.
Yeah. But if people are finding kind of a roundabout way of getting that rental income and then providing the units that people need, we're setting ourselves up for a pretty, I want to say, dangerous future if people aren't protected in the houses that they're living in.
Yeah. I think let's probably go to part 2 and we can talk about solutions, or what we think in your field of mortgages and in my field of real estate.
Yeah, let's do that. We'll talk about it and what our opinions are about the proposed solutions.
Thank you all for watching our first episode of Canada's Real Deal.
We hope you enjoyed the content. We're going to have a lot more coming, but make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube and on Spotify.